the thing that makes me happy is that people want to keep walking through the door, so I'm going to be happy about that, and that's my motivation. And this I've been banging on about this for years since I left Sepia. I'm going to open my own business, and now we've finally opened it, and I love every minute of it. We're here every single day, and I just love it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. There's been a fascinating trend to come out of the upheaval of the last few years. After plying their trade in the big cities, many chefs have made a tree change to find a greater life-work balance and to celebrate produce of a region, to raise the stakes for regional dining. What does it take to make that big shift? Terry Robinson is the co-owner of Old Salt Distillery in Nowra in regional New South Wales. Terry, how are you?
Good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. It's been a little while since we've caught up with each other, but a lot has changed, and you've made a huge move out of the city. Well, what's it been like?
It's been fantastic. A breath of fresh air, I guess, is the simplest way to sort of portray it and explain it. It was just, as city life, you're in the rat race, and so sort of in tuned with what everyone is and everyone else is doing. It's just this huge breath of fresh air. It's good. It's a bit more slow motion, but it's nice.
was you say that it is nice, but was that transition difficult to make that change for you?
Yeah, it was huge. Me and my wife moved down. We bought a house and renovated it, and in the aim to start a new young family, and being chefs, there's not a huge food scene down here, and there's not a lot of restaurants and things to choose from or as a backup plan, but we'd always wanted to start our own business. So, it was kind of just that real nice change, and like integration into any change, is difficult. You just sort of got to work with what you've given and how hard you look for it.
Well, you rose to fame with some incredible restaurants, which we can talk about shortly. But these days, you're not just a chef. You're doing all sorts of things. You're distilling. And tell us about what you're doing there at Old Salt Distillery.
So at Old Salt Distillery, we're primarily a distillery, and that needs to be our main business, being a producer wholesaler. But we've sort of gone one up on most other breweries and distilleries throughout the country and built a fully commercial kitchen as well inside the distillery. And then on top of that, I enjoy drinking beer and I know how to make it, so we'd be crazy not to. So we make a range of our own beer, fruit-based seltzers. We've got at the moment 3 styles of gin, winter wheat vodka, limoncello. We're working on fruit liqueurs, and I've just started our whiskey production.
Wow.
So there's a lot happening in terms of alcohol, and then on top of that, we have the full commercial kitchen, which we trade over weekends, serving lunch and dinner. Doing what we know. Yeah.
Well, this is such a crazy transition. You were head chef of what was arguably the best restaurant in the country at the time, Sepia, to years later, distilling and brewing beers. What was it like jumping into that sort of realm with the trial and error? What led you to do that?
One of my long-term goals, and my wife's as well, was to build a restaurant and then use that restaurant to leverage to build a distillery, close the restaurant, retire on the distillery. That was the 5, 10 and 15-year plan. But as we were in search for the site for a restaurant, that sort of COVID pandemic started to hit, and we were thinking, how are we going to manage a restaurant in this climate? Where are we going to get money from? How are we going to, can we even start a business? And then it just sort of forced us to compress the idea into one. And it just all sort of happened. Everything fell into place. It was never if we rewound 3 years ago and you said to me, would you want to open a restaurant inside a micro distillery in South Nowra? I would have told you were crazy. But it just took us it took us so long to find. It took us 3 years to find the site. We were sort of just got to the point where we were like, we had to make a decision and had to do something. And then came the birth of Old Salt Distillery.
Let's talk about distilling for a second. Like, is there similarities or things that you could draw from your chefing career and dish creation and understanding of ingredients that helped you enter the realm of distilling?
Yes, there is. They kind of go hand in hand in a lot of aspects where it's there's a science behind it. There's a science behind cooking. There's with distilling and brewing, you're following a recipe, same as you would a chef. And it'd be like if you gave three brewers all the same beer recipe, I bet they'd make you three different styles of beer or different types of beer, you know. And it's the same with this. If you gave a chef a chicken and told him to cook a chicken, you get three different types of chicken. So they are very similar, but distilling gets quite technical because it starts to fall into a different category where you're producing dangerous goods because the alcohol's above 20%. And there's a lot more in the chemical compounds with aging in wood and all those sorts of things, adding fruits and distilling temperatures and whatnot. But a lot of similarities. And I'd been brewing a lot as an avid home brewer. So I kind of got a really good understanding of it. Not to say that I was any professional home brewer or whatever, but it's like anything, you know, you start somewhere and if you put enough time and effort and research into it, you can become great at it.
I want to explore what you're doing there at Old Salt Brewery sort of more in depth a bit later on, but take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family growing up?
It's funny that food in my family, we weren't, I guess, wealthy or whatever growing up. We were just that sort of average family. My father was a printer. My mother was a teacher. Don't get me wrong, food was a big part of it. Like my nan was heavily involved in the CWA, the Riverina. She had 50,000 hectares sort of out towards Spirellan and was grain farmers predominantly, which, funny story, links up to what we're doing now. All the grain that we buy is from a farm that is not far from where Nan's property was. In Whitton, yeah, the malt house, Voyager Craft Malt, yeah. So, and they actually used to work for my uncle. So crazy, right? That 6 degrees of separation. But yeah, so whenever we visited Nan, it was always learning how to make those old school jams, and she'd make her own cordials and scones and all that sort of thing. But to be honest, the way I fell into cooking was to get me out of trouble. I was just out causing trouble on the weekend. So Mum said, you need to go get a job. And I got a job as a kitchen hand on weekends, yeah, after school. And then as literally the second that I could get a job, I got a job, yeah. End of year 10, as soon as I finished that, I was straight into the kitchen full-time, started an apprenticeship.
Take us back to those days. What was sort of the really important venues really early on for you and people that sort of helped you start to build your career?
I can tell you turning points. I thought about it today. It sparked that conversation with myself was when I worked at Tetsuya's, the caliber of chefs that I was working with at the time, I never would have thought, like Vicky Wilde signed my indentureship back when he used to indenture apprentices in 2003 at Tetsuya's. And I had the chance to work with some really great chefs, and Martin Ben being one of them, who ended up being my long-term mentor. Like I worked under Martin Ben for 11 years, and worked with Darren Robertson and Dan Puskas and all sorts of great chefs. But Sano, I don't know his last name. I just know him as Sano, the Japanese chef. He's Sano Sushi on Instagram. I remember one day I was cutting scampi and I'd just rip the paper and throw it on the tray and be like, okay, cool, and cut them up, and put them on there. And he'd go, no, why don't you lay them nice? Cuts the paper the size of the tray. And he said, there's a difference here. There's good and then there's great. And you can choose which one you want to be. And I was like, wow, okay. I like being great. That looks really good, and from then on I sort of really started to set goals with where I wanted to be with this career, because before then, it was the job to get me out of trouble. I'd get paid, I'd go to work and go home and sleep and wake up and do it all over again. But that sort of really helped shape my career, and I guess helped me choose a lot of good decisions that probably led me to a lot of these places that I got a chance to work at.
You mentioned 11 years with Martin Ben, which is quite extraordinary. Do you have any stories of moments in time of what it was like working with Martin and the impact that he had on you?
Yeah, stories that'll make your hair curl. it's endless, yeah. So it was 4 years with Martin at Tetsuya's as an apprentice, literally from the first year till qualified. And from then, there's not a lot I can remember because the training was so intense. It was Tetsuya's. It was back then. It was Three Hat. That was one of the best restaurants back in that time, you know. And it wasn't till 3 years later that I worked with him at Sepia again, and that's when we sort of formed this relationship where we just have each other's back. I knew how he thinks, he knew how I think, and we worked really well together. And I really liked where that business went and just how quick it sort of took those leaps and bounds, and how involved I was in it as well. You know, in fine dining, you give your life. It's just part of the way the restaurant works, you know. Even with when I was at Quay, it was the same. It was you give it everything or nothing, you know. It's the only way you can sort of make yourself known and fit into that team, because there's a whole kitchen full of 20 guys and they're just giving it everything, you know. They turn up every day, they work long, just crazy hours, and then they go out partying all night together, and it's just this like camaraderie of this military camaraderie, you know, where it's you know more about each other than your family does.
Your resume is incredible, and the restaurants you just rattled off, Tetsuya's, Quay, Sepia, were those kitchens different, and did you take different things from them?
Yeah, hugely different. Not only the amount of chefs that I've worked with have now gone on to open their own businesses or whatever, and I've stayed in touch with them and learnt from them through that. They all vary so much, just in style, in culture. There was a big part of like a Three Hat restaurant succeeding, not that I've ever had one, but I've always worked in them, is the team. It's so important, and it's so important culture, and that's why I really learned culture. And I thought one thing I want in life, when I was at Tetsuya's, one of my main goals was to be in the newspaper, so my dad would open the newspaper one day and see his son in there. And I did that. I achieved that goal when I won the Josephine Pignolet Young Chef of the Year. And then I guess with my business now, I want to have good culture, but I don't know how to see it from another perspective, you know. But that's something that I learnt from all of those kitchens, which was consistent throughout all of them, and that I really want. And I'd strive to do that, to train the young chefs that wanted to be, that were where I was one day, and to become sort of where I am maybe one day, or become themselves. But learn that culture in hospitality is everything, because it's such a hard industry.
You managed to get the role working closely with Martin Ben at Sepia, helping him sort of lead the team. And were there any sort of experiences or moments that you can share, or stories of cooking around the world or at Sepia that sort of epitomise sort of what you experienced? Yeah,
there's two huge. There's a lot of events that we did that were big, but there's two really, really big ones that stood out and that helped not only shape my name and what I've done and what I've done with Martin, but also the restaurant and Martin himself. We went to and did a dinner at Hooker Lodge in the North Island in New Zealand, and it was great. We went over there, and we flew over, and another chef came with us, and it was just this like peeled back layers. We got to know each other. This other part of it was like we were on holidays, because we were at a luxury sort of accommodation. Something that we'd never be able to afford, at $3,000 a night for a room, something ridiculous like that, you know. But then yet we still had to put on the whites and do a dinner. So it was nice to spend that time and have that as an experience that, like, not a lot of chefs can say that they do that and sort of go to those sorts of places. But just, yeah, it's to go with the owner of Sepia, Martin Ben, and we're flying out together, sitting, in an airplane flying to New Zealand. It's pretty crazy, but it's great at the same time. And the other was when we did a dinner at Le Bernardin in New York with Eric Repair. That was just life changing, and it was Martin Ben and Vicky Wild are very like. They set these crazy goals and like they want to achieve it. Like it was, so they flew over before I did. And me and Rodney were to fly over afterwards. And they booked. It was like, I think Vicky's line was it was 11 stars over 5 days of how many restaurants they were going to visit, as in adding up all the stars of the restaurants. So there was these brutal dinners out. We went to Per Se, and it was like 22 courses, and we finished there at like 3 o'clock in the morning. We had to get up and set up for this dinner the following morning. But it was so nice, and just that walking the streets of them and dining out and just like letting our hair down and then putting the face on and being serious when we did it. And we know how each other work. We know our limits. We know what needs to be done. And I liked being the guy that could back Martin up in any kind of situation, whatever was thrown at us. And yeah, I made sure that was a good goal of mine, and to show that kind of respect. And even at Quay, like Peter Gilmore had such trust in our guys. It was such a big restaurant. It was always full. It was always pumping, but you could see this level of trust where he knows he could walk away and trust certain characters to keep that at bay. So yeah.
You cooked for some of the most renowned food writers in New York on that trip that you spoke of. Were you nervous about that? Did that add to the pressure of everything that you were doing?
Yeah, that was huge. It was to step into a kitchen, and there was less than 24 hours to prepare what we used to do in Sepia in another kitchen for people that we'd never known of before, and not knowing how they worked. At Sepia, we could gauge how the customers would work, what speed they wanted to eat at, but not knowing who we were cooking for, and the fact that it was like the high-end writers, like what their style was. When we found out halfway through the dinner that a lot of them wouldn't even finish the dinner, they'd just get up and leave when they're done, for the New York Times writers. And you know what Martin's like. It's like, oh, you're going, okay, here's a couple of extra courses before you go. It was such a great thing. He wanted you to try everything. But so we'd try and hit fast forward, and yeah, it was great. Because it's such a big kitchen, they're like, here you go, you got your own kitchen to yourself. It was just, it was like, there's so many stories about it. It was amazing. And the time before and after, and even when we sort of caught up with you over there, I remember I've still got the photo of you, me, Martin and Vicky living the New York life.
This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, using technology helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW. You made a shift in the last couple of years away from chefing and joined Victor Churchill. Tell us how that came about and what you were doing there.
So I left Sepia wanting to start my own business, the restaurant and then the distillery. But in that, it had been 2003 till 2016 with no more than really 2 weeks off, where the restaurant closed for 2 weeks over Christmas. So no big breaks, big holidays. I was pretty burnt out, and I wanted to just sort of, have a sabbatical, a bit of a break just from my life, because I'd spend so much time and effort in building other people's dreams, and I kind of realized that, and it was like time to start chasing my own dreams. So I traveled for 8 months all around the world, and then I met my wife, and then we decided to come back to Australia, and because you get the travel bug and you sort of think, oh, I could stay over here a bit longer. Let's go to another country, another country. It's so easy to get around, and then you kind of go, oh, Australia's where it's at. We need to sort of ground ourselves. And we flew back, and I'd saved up so much money all that time. I spent every dollar. I had to borrow money to get home off my parents. And then we got home and I was just sort of so broken. I was like, okay, I need a job and we need to start again. This is not a great way to start a business, but let's get back into the swing of things. And I always wanted to learn more about butchery. So to learn about butchery, it's hard because meat's so expensive. Most restaurants will get it broken down already. And I approached Anthony Huckstep and sort of said, I want to learn about butchery. And he said, how about you learn about charcuterie and butchery together? I went, okay, that sounds interesting. And he said, well, have you ever been? And you know what was crazy? He asked me if I'd ever been in a Victor Churchill. And honestly, I'd never been in there before. I don't know why. It was just something I'd never looked at, and I walked in and just loved it. I was blown away. I was just like, what is going on in this place? It just takes you in, and then there's so many questions, and being a chef, you want to know all about what's happening here. And then I met Romeo, and next thing you know, 2.5 years passed. But in that time, Romeo had, he'd left to do his thing. So I kind of took his role and, was the head chef at Victor Churchill for 1.5 years, and got to know the butchers, know Darren O'Rourke really well, and a lot of the other butchers there, and chefs, and built up a team. And it was crazy for a butcher shop that has, when it was going, there were 6 chefs, 4 chefs, 2 pastry chefs, yeah. And we were like flat out. We were doing 90-hour weeks sometimes, just like any other restaurant, like it was, it's crazy. But then they sort of brought in that whole, everyone can only do 50 hours and you got to pay them overtime. And that was the first time it hit me, and I was in a head chef position, which was good. And I guess the biggest thing I took from that was, how am I going to do this in my business? I'm so used to working so much that, yeah, now it's sort of a thing in the past, which is, it's for the good, I think. But that's what sort of made us shape the business in our business where we'd only trade a couple of days a week and then the rest was production, and then pushed us to do the distillery even more, which we don't know a lot about. But yeah, it's, yeah. And I guess going back to the Victor Churchill, sorry, go a bit off topic here, but Anthony he's very well at selling anything, and it was so great that I could ask him any question about anything, and he'd set me up with someone within his business that would teach me and tell me all about it. He'd organise staff visits to say you wanted to know more about Ranges Valley. He'd organise for you to go to the farm and learn all about what Ranges Valley is about, and that just the beauty behind it, and the fact that he helps brands like Black Onyx, was Anthony's idea of that 1 in 10 freak cow has this crazy marble score, so he marketed it as Black Onyx. And yeah, just all those little things, and you sort of getting back a bit down to the grassroots of where it starts, before it becomes a steak on the plate, is learning the meat education. And I believe massively in his philosophy of eating better meat and less of it. Yeah. And that's being sustainable in this day and age.
How did it feel when you finally found the site to sort of do the Old Salt Distillery and sort of embark on your own vision and dream with your wife? What was it like sort of landing on it and getting it all started?
It happened by chance from someone that I met. We hadn't even found this site, and they said their friends are about to move out of this site. You should have a look at it. And within 2 weeks, we'd signed the lease. And then 2 weeks after that, it was a fantastic feeling, taking the picture of a quay. This is 3 years of looking up and down the coast. We looked everywhere, up and down the south coast, to try and find a spot. We were looking in Kangaroo Valley, Culburra, Sussex Inlet, Ulladulla, all up and down and everywhere, and to land in Nowra, was crazy, but good, I think, because the population here, I think it worked out well. It was a smart business decision in the end, but sort of taking that picture of the quays, like, oh, we got this place, and it was a big old empty shed, and I guess the only way to understand what's done is to visit and see, because once you walk in, there's this, like I said, it's hard to explain. You have to come and check it out. But 2 weeks later, we went into full lockdown. So that was, that was the first sort of point where we had that realization of like, wow, this is going to be really tough now. Like, everyone's told us business is going to be hard, but we can't even work on the place yet. We've just got the keys. Yeah.
Well, these days you're distilling and brewing and cooking. Tell us a little bit about your food. What sort of food fits in that environment? Is there a dish or two that you've cooked recently that sort of epitomizes where you're at with your cooking?
Yeah, so a lot of the menu is designed to be cooked over the wood fire grill, just because the first 9 weeks was me in the kitchen and Michelle in the bar, and we're licensed for 120, and we can seat 68 inside and 30 outside. So when it's busy, and we had to be smart with this. If 100 people walk through the door, how are we going to serve them all? So with that, a lot of the food was designed. I took a lot from everywhere I worked, and I'd be crazy not to, because sepia, for instance, like a lot of influence from there, that because there is no sepia anymore, all those techniques I know and learn, I try and incorporate in the menu just to keep them alive more than anything. And also Victor Churchill, a lot of the charcuterie, the French traditional charcuterie, it's amazing how many people know and understand and love that, but there's just not a lot of places doing it, because I guess it's old-fashioned in a way, but it's trendy as also. Like, I guess Spanish tapas is super trendy, you know, so we do a lot of the French charcuterie, so make our own chicken liver parfait. I make dips, some classics like the French onion dip and whipped feta. So they're easy to plate, easy to serve, and delicious, and great with a beer or a cocktail on a nice afternoon, you know. I think one of the latest dishes that we do that is accepted really well by the local public is just a rump cap that I cook on the barbecue and just serve it with some vegetables. All our vegetarian dishes are cooked on the barbecue, so we just do pumpkin and carrots and chimichurri, and just simple, like really easy but affordable as well. I think the spend per head is where we're trying to target, because we are a micro distillery. We do have a little restaurant in it, but we're somewhere in between both of those, so we don't take any bookings, and we offer table service, but you still need to come to the bar and order. So it's quite quirky, it's quite tricky, but it's realistic in this day and age. You know, it means I can have less people on the floor, less guys in the kitchen, and the business still runs. And then another one of the dishes that I had to take off, but I've gotten back on, is I got onto, one of our landlord has a really good friend who has another friend who owns a boat just out of Shoalhaven Heads, and he goes fishing for prawns. So we get prawns, and you could say they're local because they're less than 10 kilometres away is where they catch them. So, and I just do like garlic prawns with, the little side of bread and the finger bowl, you know, that. It's quite rustic. It's super rustic. It's all the layers are peeled back. We still get some people that had been customers at Sepia, knew what we were about, and then they sort of go, are you sort of upset that you're not doing Sepia food or whatever? And like, I don't know what they expect me to answer to that, you know, but I did fine dining. I love fine dining, but this is me. I guess this is me cooking on a barbecue at home. You know, it's Whenever I cooked anything on the weekend, it was on a barbecue at home, less dishes.
Take us into the distillery. Is there something that you're really proud of, like one of the creations that you have that you can tell us about?
I think so. Because it's so new, our still was the last part of the business to come, just due to lockdowns, COVID, shipping. We ordered it in 2020 and it got installed. It was supposed to be 4-month turnaround. It got installed in 2022 towards the end of it. So it's only been operational for a few months, which is crazy. So the kitchen's been keeping us alive as a business, but now the still is in full swing. So I think we're getting good feedback, but the best feedback is like from a chef's perspective, when a reviewer comes in and gives you a score, that kind of determines what level your food's at, right? because all your customers come and say that's delicious, but to a reviewer, is it? To the, like that sort of that system that they put you through to rate where you're at as a chef, as a business and whatnot. And I feel it's the same with the spirits. So we're going to enter some competitions and try and get some feedback from there and see where we're at with our spirits, because I think they're delicious. So with the vodka, we're trying to understand chemical compounds. So it's like wine. When you drink wine, how does your taste buds react to it? Is there strong in tannins that makes your jaw tense up? With vodka, it's like, does the tip of your tongue tingle? That's a fault in vodka, where I guess a lot of people don't know that, and it's an education, and that's what we're trying to provide as well. As anything we learn, we'll pass on to our customers. But we're trying to make a smooth vodka. We've got some really nice gins. We do a Navy Strength and then 2 styles, a citrus and a classic sort of London Dry. And then our latest creations are the fruit liqueurs. So we're using fruit from Parkspawn Produce, my mother, and creating a boutique line of fruit liqueurs that are just great for, they're an ingredient for cocktails and bartenders. I think that's what we're sort of going to market it as.
That sounds amazing. And I'm glad you brought up your mother with Parkspawn Produce. We've had her on the producers some time ago. What's it been like for you as a chef, seeing your mother dive into that world of produce after being a teacher?
It's such a touch on my past of what she grew up doing. Like like Nan had grain and meat chickens, and we grow our own fruit and veg. And Mum does the same. She's got her chickens that lay her eggs. She's got ducks that lay eggs as well, and they have a couple of those every year, And they've got she's gone into I'm not sure what pushed her into the soft fruit market, but she sort of started with a lot of the ideas I got from Quay, like the Alpine strawberries, for instance. Richard Kalina used to grow them for Peter Gilmore. And then Mum said, oh, look at these strawberries. I went, wow, they're great, but have you ever tried an Alpine strawberry, And then next thing you know, she's growing 14 different types of Alpine strawberries. But everything she grows there, it's because of her knowledge and like what she's learned from like living off the land. She understands it in that crazy way, and we haven't had anything bad from her. Like, she's grown wasabi there. She's got a trufflery, so 1.1 hectares of truffle inoculated Perigord truffle trees, the oak and hazelnut. But it's never a big interest in her. I guess she doesn't eat truffles, But I'll be like, Mum, this is what you do with truffles, yada, yada. She's like, yeah, I just sort of shave them on scrambled eggs, whatever. To her, it's like so it's sort of our idea. Like, what we're trying to get her to do now is grow botanicals for us, because she's got the land, she's got the knowledge. So that's a sort of, it's great. And I love it because it does remind me so much of just, I guess, our family history, from her side, from Nan and that farming background.
Amazing. Well, it's been a long time coming, and you've been working at it for quite a while, but you do have your own sort of place now and doing amazing things. What do you love about what you're doing?
One of our customers, every time he comes in, he looks up at us and he brings friends and he says, look, you can hear him say, look, watch this, Terry. And I look up and I just smile at him. I don't know. He just makes me smile. I don't know what he said. And he said, see, that smile, it just makes you want to spend money. And it's just the fact that after all that, like when we were building, like COVID hit, and then price of timber and materials went through the roof. And then when we finally got to finishing building and opening the kitchen, all the hospitality was starting back up. The price of everything went up, all the produce started climbing. Then we went in, the steel came in, the shipping went up, was it like 35% or something crazy? And when you're shipping like a 20-foot container, it's a lot of money. And then we're into bottling now, and now the war in Ukraine has affected bottle manufacturing because of the gas supply. So now the bottles have gone up 25%. Yeah, so it's just I'm not going to ever let it get me down. I've gotten used to things are going to go up. that's just the life that we live now. But the thing that makes me happy is that people want to keep walking through the door. So I'm going to be happy about that. That's my motivation. And this I've been banging on about this for years since I left Sepia. I'm going to open my own business, and now we've finally opened it. This week is our first birthday, believe it or not. So 12 months has gone by already. And I love every minute of it. We're here every single day, and I just love it. Yeah.
Well, Terry, congratulations on what you're building there, and it's such a great honour to get you on the show and hear a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.